Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The North Ridgeville City Council Committee of the Whole meeting is now in session. Today is Wednesday, September 10th, 2025. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Swink.
Here.
Schaefer.
Here.
Abens.
Here.
Winkle.
Here.
Awig.
Here.
DeVries.
Excused.
Jacobs.
Here. From the administration this evening, we have with us Mayor Kevin Corcoran and Planning Director Kim Lieber. At a recent council meeting, we referred 2025-104 to committee for further discussion. Clerk, if you could please read the ordinance again.
2025-104, an ordinance designating the North Ridgeville Community Improvement Corporation as an agency of the city under Ohio Revised Code Section 1724.10, authorizing the execution of an agreement and plan for industrial, commercial, distribution, research, and development.
Thank you. So this legislation was discussed at the Committee of the Whole meeting held on August 4th. You might recall we had quite a bit of conversation and discussion regarding this particular piece of legislation and essentially ran out of time. From my recollection, we had the opportunity to hear some of the benefits of the CIC, which include allowing the city to move a little bit more swiftly when it comes to certain transactions, particularly real estate transactions. And I think we all know with real estate nowadays how quickly things move. The other benefit that we had heard was it would allow the city an opportunity to have access to grants and other funding that they otherwise may not have access to. That said, there were still some concerns raised about the makeup of the board of the CIC and the fact that there is currently no council representation on that board. I recall hearing that there are many cities that use different makeups of these CICs. Some of them include council members, some of them may not. But I think we all understand that council still would have to fund the CIC in order for them to be able to, use any city funds. But nonetheless, it did seem that the general consensus was that there should be council representation on the CIC board itself. So that's kind of a high-level overview, but hopefully that serves as a summary of our last meeting. My goal here this evening is to determine if we are collectively able to come up with a recommendation in order to move forward. I will start, I guess, by saying that I do feel it's important for council to be represented on the CIC board. My initial thoughts were to tie that representation to a specific position on the board, whether it be the president or the president pro tem or the chair of the finance committee or something along those lines. But the more I thought about it, I think it may be best to allow the president, whoever that may be at the time, the ability to appoint a member of council that would best serve the CIC. When you look at the seven of us, we all have different backgrounds, different skill sets, and different knowledge bases when it comes to economic development. And so if there was a point in time when, there was a member of council who had experience in land development or banking and finance or real estate, that may be a more appropriate person to sit on the CIC board, as they could offer some meaningful insights to and help the CIC board generally. So I guess at this point I will open it up to the members of council to see if we have any additional comments at this time.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Winkle.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I agree with a lot of statements having some sort of council involvement in this. I did a little bit of research, and just to share with everybody, not a lot of towns have CICs, and it's kind of hit and miss. of the CICs I found, about 85% of them, and I didn't find many, so don't let the number fool you there, but I didn't find many, but let's just say about 80% of them or so have council involvement in different ways. Some are appointed by position, by like president. Some are appointed by council members of 2 members, 1 or 2 members. Some are all appointed by council, or some are just the members are approved by council. So it's a myriad of involvement from council members with the board to some extent. So I agree. I think I spoke briefly about it last time that I'd like to come to some sort of consensus between all of us here that the council is involved in this. I'm here as a steward of the people who elected me to be here. So I don't only think about right now, but 20 years from now, who are the characters that will be inside the CIC may be, well, none of us. So set up something that, for the future and now, and have a council involvement. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winkle.
Through the chair.
Mrs. Swink.
I did the same homework that Cliff did. Some members were appointed, I think it would probably be best to add it to a standing committee, like how we have, how you appoint the committee members and such. I think that we probably should at least at minimum have 2. What if one can't make it? Or maybe an alternate, I think would be a good idea. I did speak to the law director at the city of Nova, and I emailed him about it, and he's like, call me. So I called him, and he said, the biggest problem you're gonna have is funding. So my worry is that we're gonna end up being stuck funding a lot of it, which I get it, we buy properties, it's not anything out of the ordinary. But he did say that it's not an easy feat to get money for, so I just wanna throw that out there as well. But I agree, we need to have sitting members of council on that board.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you.
Mrs. Swink. Are there any additional comments at this time?
I'll
Mrs.
make a
Awig?
comment. I think the CIC sounds like a great thing. It seems like it would give opportunities for us, but I think that it sounds like the council would be more comfortable to have a representative and 1 or 2. I think in discussing it a little bit with administration, that one of the concerns was the availability of possibly the council member to be available at the time to make a quick decision. But I think that that might go into who is selected, somebody that would be, available.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Awig. Any additional comments from council?
Through the chair.
Mr. Schaefer?
I read through this several times, and there were a lot of concerns I had about management and oversight. And are we getting ourselves into something we can't easily extract ourselves from? Should there be a force majeure clause in this that would allow us to get out of it if there was an instance where the city was financially strapped? I would hate to have to go to constituents and say, we can't get out of this, so we're going to have to cut police, fire, and paramedics. And that should not be an option. There should be some way to extract ourselves from this. And I also think it goes to the role of government. The government primarily is to provide basic services, and getting into real estate speculation seems far afield from what our role is. When I was in the military, they always told us to focus on your core mission. My concern, if we get distracted with too many things, we're going to be doing a lot of things really poorly instead of what we're supposed to do really well. I also was kind of questioned why the phrase "not inconsistent" appears throughout this document. I was concerned that this might be AI generated.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. Are there any additional comments at this time from council members? So I will remind council that this is structured in such a way that council does have to appropriate money to the CIC. So, if it was a situation where, as you say, financially strapped, I would think that the council at that point in time just would not appropriate any additional money to the CIC. I'm not sure about the comment about not inconsistent. I don't know if a member of the administration would like to comment on if it was AI generated.
I would just first like to introduce Russ Balthus. You probably
yes.
remember him from Squire, who's our outside counsel on this matter.
Thank you.
You can use mine. Sorry.
First, the council president's exactly correct. There's no obligation for the city to appropriate any funds, and that would always be subject to the council's appropriating power. The document is not AI generated. And also, the main thing that the council would do is just designate it as the city's official CIC. And the city can also take away that designation with an ordinance at any time. The ordinance designates it. If at some point the council wanted to undesignate it, the council would have the ability to do that.
Through a new piece of legislation, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yep.
Right, I'd like to point out that the CIC already exists. So this legislation before you is just designating the CIC as a tool of the city. And you can legislate that away if you don't like the CIC for whatever reason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Mrs. Swank's point regarding multiple members of council, I hadn't thought about the idea of an alternate. I know that when it comes to planning commission, I appoint one member as the liaison, council's liaison to planning commission, and we have an alternate liaison. Would that type of arrangement work for a CIC, to have an alternate?
Well, it's a nonprofit board, and you being on a couple, or at least the chamber, for example, we don't have alternates. We just have the board members, and that's it. So I don't, you want to chime in on that?
I didn't have any issue with that, sorry. I would agree. I think that it's important to note that a CIC is a nonprofit entity that then has a city designation. So unlike city boards and commissions that often have alternates, nonprofit boards, an alternate board member is not a common structure under Ohio law for nonprofit corporations. You're on the board or you're not on the board.
Okay. Thank you for
Mr.
that
President,
clarification. Mrs.
I have a
Awig?
question. In terms of the members, how many members would have to vote? Do you have to have a unanimous vote of all the members on the board? Or
The board generally would act as any nonprofit, so normally it would just be a majority of the board to take action as the CIC.
Any additional comments from council members? Or from the administration at this point? I would like to open it up to public comment. Do we have anybody in our audience this evening who wishes to speak regarding this particular ordinance, 2025-104? If you could please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, we will give you up to 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name's Susan Olson. I live on 7685 Mannock Road, North Ridgeville, Ohio. Thank you, Safety Services, for the street. It's wonderful. My question is actually very simple, and I think it's something, as being a normal citizen on the other side of this dais here, is this absolutely positively necessary? Considering we're looking at a future where everyone is saying finances are going to be strapped, I mean, do we really need to add something to the city budget that's going to need funding? Plain and simple. I don't suppose you have to answer. You could consider.
Thank you, Mrs. Olson.
Mr. President,
Mr.
could
Abens?
I answer that question?
Sure.
Quite frankly, the people on the board are already paid by the city through other positions. So the board itself
Hold on
would
one
not-
second. The board itself doesn't receive any pay
That's
for their
correct.
positions. It has nothing to do with the city paying the people. Remember, even the city council person, should you require that as a condition, you're not joining the board as a city council member. You're joining the board as a person. Same with any other nonprofit board. If you joined the Board of Community Care. You'd be joining as a person, not as a city official. Just, I wanted to make that clear.
It's basically a volunteer position. Right?
Mr.
So
bylaws
it doesn't,
indicate-
it doesn't really,
The
the
bylaws
board
indicate
itself
the
does
members
not.
serve without compensation.
Yeah, the board itself does not cost the city any money. It's whatever their activities, potential activities would garner. And if the city is strapped at the time, obviously the board would receive no funds until the city can extract itself from the financial situation.
Mr. President?
Mr.
As
President?
far as it being, go ahead, Mrs. Lee.
Just one other point. One of the, topics we brought up in previous meetings on this subject is that the CIC might have avenues of funding and grants available to it that the city wouldn't as a local government through foundations or through other resources. So one of the reasons for establishing the CIC is to either partner with the city and CIC or for the CIC to be able to attain outside funding in a manner that the city couldn't do on its own. So that would be a reason to form the CIC that would be a pure benefit to North Ridgeville.
Yeah, and I think that whether we're talking about North Ridgeville or any city, I think during the normal course of business for a city, from time to time, the acquisition of property may be a necessary function. I mean, we're essentially doing that already now. We've seen legislation come before us to purchase property. I think the difference is that with the CIC, rather than having to necessarily wait for the next council meeting and take a vote, the council would essentially fund, put money from the general fund into the CIC, allowing the members of the CIC to make the decision of an acquisition a little bit quicker. And so that's where, where we're talking about real estate and how quickly a lot of times transactions occur, this would be a benefit, for the city being able to move a little bit more quickly. And in addition, the access to additional funds and grants that we may not otherwise have access to. Mrs. Awig, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, instead of costing us money, I see it would be a way that we would be able to get more money through grants, having the CIC. I mean, I know we have to probably give you some money to begin with, but I think that it would bring in additional money, not cost us any more money.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the audience who would like to speak? If you could please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Yes. My name is Callie Zingali. I live at 35112 Jason Drive. I think it's really great speak about grants, but in application, I feel like where has that energy been up until now? Because it's up in roundabout after roundabout, traffic project after traffic project. Yes, we can get money from grants. We can always get money from grants, even without the CIC. But we are constantly missing out on all kinds of grant money, but we're getting roundabout grant money from ODOT. Ask Medina how that went. We are focused on the wrong things right now. We're ringing alarm bells. We're asking citizens for more money. And now you want more places to put money you're saying we don't have. Make it make sense. This is all to consolidate control. And I think a lot of you up there know it. And I hope voters remember that in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zingali.
Through the chair.
Mrs. Swink?
I think what Susan Olson might have been asking is, will this CIC be a yearly budget item when it comes to creating the budget? Or will it just, if you need help, the CIC would ask? Like, would it be a budget line item come budget time? I think that's what Susan's trying to ask.
I guess it just depends. The initial funding of the CIC would give it some money to do whatever it's looking to do. and then when that money's gone, they would probably come back and ask for more.
So as far as like the yearly budget, say if the CIC was a budget line item that the finance committee's asked to pass, I'm gonna assume that money would come out of the capital improvement project funds?
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
If you use the example of the house that we bought up the block, for example, we talked a lot at that time about the length of time that it took for us to get the purchase approved through the legislative process. And, with the CIC, we've talked about how if the CIC had funding, that it could move a lot faster. So that transaction would have happened faster. It's on a real estate purchase, and I know we're focused on that. We've talked about the speed in which we can purchase that property. So, you have seen throughout the course of your time on council that from time to time there's opportunities for us to purchase property, and sometimes there's multiple properties in 1 year. So, for example, let's say, I can't remember if we purchased those two properties in the same year, but the R&K building property and the old Hal Bugner office building property, let's say that, one of those transactions happened, the CIC purchases one of those properties, and then we have another opportunity to get the other property, we would come back to council and ask for additional funding to allow that second opportunity to happen. So it could be where they ask more than one time per year for money. And again, I know I'm focused on property acquisition, but that was one of the main reasons why we considered, forming the CIC to begin with. So that's just an example. There's other examples, I'm sure, given some time I could think of, but those are the ones that are jumping off the top of my head.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And I'd just like to point out, that's money that we already, have spent anyway. It's not like it's new money. It's not like there's a cost of operation for the CIC. I know that we had to pay a filing fee, but that was the cost of the CIC, of paying the filing fee, at the state level to create the nonprofit corporation. That's it for now.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to address council regarding this ordinance?
Mr. President?
Go ahead, Mr. Winkle.
I'd like to add something for Ms. Olson. So we, if you look at the Exhibit A, I just want to point this out because it was something I wanted to make sure was in this for me to feel comfortable with it. If you look at that under Section 4, number B, it says the city shall not be required to make any financial contributions to the CIC, and nothing in this agreement and the plan shall be construed as permitting the CIC to obligate the city except as expressly provided forth in this agreement. So to answer the question, I talked about, but if we are in a financial position where we don't feel that we want to fund this, us as council would not fund it. And I hope that was helpful with the question you had. So this is not obligating us to have to fund it. It's just we choose to do so. And hopefully that was helpful. And then, I also want to add, anytime in my career what I do, and I do a lot of analogies with different things I do in life, but if I have another tool that can help me perform work or get things done, and it makes my job faster or more efficient, I like exploring it. The CIC, I believe, has merit. We've had purchased property. If the CIC did it or not in the last, if you go back in time and reverse history and we had this in place, I don't think we wouldn't be spending different money. We'd be sending it through a CIC, maybe working faster at it. And that's another thing I looked at when I think about this is that what would this have changed in the last year, last 2 years, whatever. Now, with the situation we're in and what we talked about, we talked about different purchases. We're looking for 10 years from now, what can we do for the city? 10 years from now, 15 years from now that could create something. There's been a lot of talk over many years, rightfully so, like planning for the future was maybe something that was lacking on. This is something that you, in my mind, could be planning for a future with a tool that could help you perform your work better. So that's how I look at it. And capital projects is just for a little bit of tidbit info. Capital project money is money we have to spend on certain things. It's also money, like we're going to try to create a town center in 15 years. All right, that would be a capital project improvement. We're going to fix a water line. We're going to fix a sewer line. That's also a capital project improvement. So that's where the money would be coming to fund this for a capital project that would help the city in the future. So that's how I look at it all. I just wanted to share with everybody, and hopefully I was helpful with your question.
Thank you. Mr. Winkle, I think that's a good analogy. This is essentially an economic tool to help the city, to do business, to do the same business that we're already doing now, just to be able to be a little bit more nimble, I guess you could say, in being able to do so. I'm sorry? Sure, if you come to the podium.
Do I have to say my name again? Susan Olson.
Good.
So if this is just really a nuts and bolts thing, and it seems like the emergency clause is used a lot, how is this just not, wouldn't the emergency clause override a need for this whole deal? Because if it's about speed, it seems like the emergency clause is used all the time, so, or and this is just nuts and bolts questions, stuff I don't know. Do you call like a special session and just say, hey, we need to vote on this legislation for this purchase? I don't know, I'm asking.
I mean, calling a special meeting would be an option.
That's why I'm wondering, this seems like unnecessary in my eyes.
Well, and you have to remember, though, the council only meets every 2 weeks. Sometimes there's a 3-week gap in
Right.
between meetings. So with the speed of how real estate transactions go, by the time, the next council meeting rolls around, we could, the city may have missed opportunities
Okay.
that it, would have liked to have been able to take advantage of.
Okay, well, I was just curious. Thank you.
Thank
for
you. Do we have any other comments from Mrs. Zingali?
One last comment. I'm not going to say everything I had to say today, but that was a great analogy. It's a tool, but also a tool in the hands of the wrong people can be very destructive. A sledgehammer is a tool, absolutely. But right now, when you're consolidating power like this, when power is centralized, people don't compete on merit anymore. They don't compete on being the best at their job or the best bid. It doesn't matter. They compete for favor for the people in power. And that's when things are dangerous. That's when backdoor deals are done. There is no visibility. And that's, I think, a concern that a lot of constituents that I've spoken to have had all over the political landscape. Democrats, Republicans, Independents. It is something that has been repeated to me over and over again. And that's just my gift to you from the voters that I have spoken to while I've been out campaigning. A tool is a tool in the right hands. Otherwise, it can be very dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just, sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could just add one thing. Though it is a Ohio nonprofit, once it would receive the designation from the city to become the city's official community improvement corporation, it is subject to Ohio's open meetings and public records laws. So I do just want to make it clear that the CIC is subject to the same public records and open meeting laws that the council is subject to. Thank you.
Thank you. That was going to be my comment as well. Any additional comments from members of council or from the administration at this point?
Through the chair.
Mr. Schaefer.
Now, I was really intrigued by what the mayor said regarding this is not exclusively for real estate property. And Mr. Winkle said it would be used for capital improvements. It seems to me like about a month ago, we allocated $60,000 to a development to a developer. And I'm really concerned that this could put us into a position to have to bail out developers who make mistakes through their own lack of due diligence. But I would like to hear from our legal representative, what is the downside of the CIC? We've heard a lot of what the positive are. What are the downsides?
I would say in my experience, I really haven't seen significant downsides in CICs. I mean, they're a tool that's available. I've seen times where you may create it and it's not as helpful as you want. Like you might create this and be ready to purchase property, but if property doesn't become available, a CIC is not going to fix that. A CIC might make you available to apply for grants that are limited to nonprofits, not municipalities or governments, but that doesn't mean you're going to get them. So I think that I would describe a CIC as a tool. Any mistakes that a CIC maybe has made in a deal or something is a mistake that would have probably been made if there hadn't been a CIC, because for the examples you're talking about, if the city is interested in purchasing a piece of property, you never know. There's always a chance that you could make a mistake. I don't know about any of the properties happening here, but maybe it's something you would regret purchasing years later, but that would have happened whether there was a CIC or the city purchased it directly. The CIC just as a tool to help it happen more quickly. I can honestly say, I mean, I've worked with many CICs. I served on a CIC for a while. They're a tool. And if people are unhappy with what the CIC is doing for any reason, council has no obligation to provide funding, no obligation to, and can revoke its certification at any time with just adopting an ordinance. And I can say I've seen very few examples and can't think of any off the top of my head. Not saying it's never happened, but I cannot think of any examples where a city has revoked its CIC's designation because they were upset or something happened that gave them pause.
Well, I'm an efficient markets economist, so to speak. And it seems to me if this property was so great, some private developer would want to buy it. Why are we essentially buying property no one else wants?
I guess I would just respond that all of the property that the city has purchased has been in line with our adopted master plan or strategies that we've discussed with council and in full support of council, whether it's according to our master plan to preserve land for employment uses where perhaps residential development would have otherwise occurred, but we purchased property and rezoned to industrial for a future industrial park, or whether it's in line with a future town center project where property becomes available. It's always been in line with a plan or city need, or, and also only as approved by council.
Thank you, Ms. Lieber. I will further add that tonight's meeting is a council committee of the whole meeting and not a board meeting of the CIC. So in order for there to be a change in the makeup of the CIC board, the existing CIC board would have to meet and vote to make that change. So with that said, at this time, I will make a motion to send 2025-104 back to council for further consideration with the condition that the CIC board changes the makeup of the CIC board to include at least one council member as appointed by the council president.
Second.
Mr. President?
Mr. Winkle?
Just clarify your motion. So it will not come back to council unless that is changed in their bylaws? Is that what you're saying?
It will still come back to council, but.
You put a condition on it.
But we're putting the condition on it that we are expecting that the CIC board will make a change to their bylaws to accommodate,
Okay,
at least
thank
one
you.
council member. So the motion was made by Jacobs and seconded by Swank to send 2025-104 back to council for consideration. Again, this is just sending back to council for consideration. We're not taking a yes or no vote as to whether or not this is going to be adopted. It's just sending back to council. Are there any comments or questions at this time? Hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Swank.
Yes.
Schaefer.
Yes.
Abens.
Yes.
Winkle.
Yes.
Awig.
Yes,
Jacobs.
Yes.
Motion carries, and 2025-104 will be sent back to council for further consideration.
Okay. Thank you. And then up next on our agenda, under new business tonight, we have a presentation on tax increment financing, which I think the assistant clerk is queuing up now. And so we will turn this over to Planning and Economic Development Director Lieber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry, I don't know how to turn off the thing to make the little mouse not go all over the place. Help us on the way. Well, thank you. We're here tonight to talk about tax increment financing. It's a tool the city of North Ridgeville has been using since, I think, 2015, but I think it's one we don't talk about very much. You probably see in your quarterly reports and in the annual appropriations process, you'll see TIF funds and fund balances and discussion of leveraging TIF for capital improvements. But I think it's a subject that we need to revisit because there's opportunities, untapped opportunities for the city of North Ridgeville. So we're here to maybe give a bit of a primer about what it is, just as a refresher, since it's not your everyday, and then to talk about how we can maybe expand that tool in North Ridgeville to our benefit. So, all right, I'm going to hand this off to the expert.
Sure. Thank you. Tax increment financing is a common tool that is used by cities. Townships and counties can also use it from time to time, but cities are the number one user of tax increment financing. And what this does is it allows, when there is an improvement to a property and the property taxes would otherwise go up, the city can exempt that property tax increase. Now the property owner continues to pay the same amount, and that money then comes to the city and is held in a special fund and is used to make public infrastructure improvements. And that's also audited every year by the state auditor. So when you think about the number one user of property taxes would be school districts, counties, other taxing authorities. Those funds are then redirected, and we'll get back to the schools in a moment because there's a way to keep the schools whole. Oh, sorry, I had a 50-50 chance and I got it wrong. So here is how TIF works generally. And again, this chart is just to kind of give you a visual representation of kind of how it works. So on the left, you have the unimproved value. So think of a building or a piece of land that has nothing on it. It has a certain value. It pays property taxes. It pays property taxes on that value. And then something comes along and somebody builds a restaurant or a retail building or a mixed-use building. The property taxes would normally go up and people would pay a higher property tax because the value is now higher. So the way a TIF would work is that initial value, the red that's represented there, that would continue to go to the taxing entities that it always has, like as it always has, so no entity loses any funds. But that new increment, that new value, is then redirected to the city and required to be used for public infrastructure improvement during a period of time that the TIF exists. And you might ask, like, well, why do we do this? And the general logic behind the state legislature when they adopted this is, let's say you have a piece of land where somebody wants to build a company that's going to provide jobs. Everybody wants it to happen, but the road is not sufficient. They need to have a heavier road or they can handle trucks or things like that. What this tool is meant to do is it enables you to get a revenue source to upgrade the public infrastructure, the road, the utilities, to be able to facilitate and support that development. There are important things to think about with TIFs. One is these are not new taxes. These are people are paying the same that they would pay whether there is a TIF or not. So you hear the words that they're getting exempted from tax, but they're paying what's called a payment in lieu of tax in the same amount. So they're not paying more tax than they would otherwise pay. They're not paying less tax. The type of TIFs that the city currently uses, and I believe is looking to use in the future, are where the schools are protected. These are often referred to as non-school TIFs. So what that means is even that added new tax that would have gone to the schools, it still does. The TIFs are designed so the schools continue to receive that money. One thing to note is under the law, when you do a non-school TIF, it's not just the city school district, but the joint vocational school district also continues to get their full share. So both of those would receive the same amount that they would have received if you had not done the TIF. The idea with this is the TIF money that the city then receives has to be used for public improvements that benefit that parcel. So it's to support improving the public infrastructure that might have more strain or more need because of this new development. And again, it can also be an economic development tool in that if you need to improve traffic signalization, improve walkability, improve connectivity or the roads or the utilities, to then make the property more desirable for any type of development that is trying to be incentivized. There are multiple types of TIFs. Throw this out just so you kind of know, because you hear a lot of things about TIFs. People talk about TIFs a lot. Each TIF is a little bit different in meaningful ways. So just to give you the most common ones that you might hear about is there's a commercial or a parcel TIF. And because lawyers have to have code sections everywhere, those are the relevant code sections underneath. It's 40B. Those are TIFs that are used for commercial property, for jobs, and and the money has to be used for public infrastructure. That's one of the types of TIFs the city has used in the past. And then there's also special municipal TIFs. Those are TIFs that are used for what's often referred to as urban redevelopment. That's not something that the city that I'm aware of is looking to do now, but it is a tool that you can actually use those pilot payments, not for public infrastructure, but to support the project itself. So if you had a project you really wanted to incentivize, it's a way of, like a CRA or another type of tax exemption, to try to incentivize a project. And then you have incentive district TIFs, which are another type of TIF to help generate revenue off of owner-occupied housing to help mitigate any impacts of that, like additional traffic signalization, road improvements, parks, things like that. So again, with a commercial parcel TIF, these are often called 40B TIFs. It can be by a certain parcel. Sometimes it's a district. And the law provides that you can exempt up to 100% of the value for up to 30 years. If you did that and did not make the school district whole, it would require the school district to give their consent. But because the city here intends to make the school district whole, it's just required to give a 14-day notice to the school district so they're aware that it's happening, but it does not impact them financially. Again, as we talked about earlier, instead of paying the normal property taxes, they pay what's called a payment in lieu of taxes. And then that is paid to the county, just like your normal property taxes would. The county would receive those funds. They would pay the school district what they're supposed to receive, and the rest that would have gone to the other real estate taxing entities would then come back to the city for deposit into a special fund that would then be used for public infrastructure improvements. When you ask what does public infrastructure improvement mean, the code defines it, the Ohio Revised Code. It's very broad, but it's exactly what you would think of: streets, sidewalks, sewer, water, drainage, stormwater, public parking, things like that.
All right, as I mentioned at the top, the city has utilized TIF since 2015. The city established 13 different TIFs over those 2 years. Those are all the 40B style commercial industrial TIFs, so only the increment of value associated with any commercial or industrial improvements are creating those pilots that then get diverted into the TIF funds. And just to reinforce, again, all of our TIFs are non-school TIFs, so the schools receive all of the revenue that they would have otherwise received. And additionally, council, you might remember every 5 years, there's an agreement that comes to council that basically says for any CRA or TIF agreement, if the schools can engage in revenue sharing if the city were to give any kind of benefit that would exceed these agreed upon thresholds. So they're protected in a couple different ways. What I think is important is to show the different fund balances of these different TIFs, so you can see that it ranges very widely from not even $5,000 in our 12th TIF district to close to 1.5 in TIF 3. And I know this map is going to be really hard to discern at far distance, but The 1.4 million is that bright hot pink on the far east side of the city. So that encompasses Lorraine and Lear and that Victory area. It includes, some of that new development that we've seen on Lorraine Road, Starbucks and Culver's and the things happening in that area, and includes the future Cypress area. So quite a lot of development in the last 10 years has occurred in that area, which just shows itself in terms of the fund balance. On the other hand, some of our lower performing, the 3 or 4,000 or 7,000, up in the northwest area of the city, west of Case Road, that whole area, which is actually now mostly Metro Parks. So they've acquired a lot of that land, and now it's called Sandy Ridge West, and they're in the process of cutting trails through that area. So not likely to generate TIF revenues, but a great community amenity nonetheless. So you can see that there's just a big range. Let me just flip back when you can kind of see the different fund balances. And again, like those monies need to be used to serve that general parcel area or TIF area. So on the fringe of it or leading up to it, yes, but it's designated for use in those areas. So keep that in mind, I guess, as we move forward. So moving past this map. What does this tell us? So we've had some uneven results. Not every TIF is generating meaningful revenue. The areas that are currently zoned commercial or zoned industrial are producing revenue because they are seeing development. But residential areas, we have quite a few of those 13 TIFs that have been placed in areas with primary residential development. And that development provides no additional, no revenues come into the TIF from residential development. That's also the same thing with farmland parcels. So council also knows you approve CAUV requests. So the current ag use valuation that the county provides to farmers to keep their land costs low. So any parcel that is enrolled in the CAUV program has not contributed $1 towards any of those TIF funds. And I guess just to kind of go back to the map, then you can kind of see where some of our TIF areas were designated in areas like the bright green area that includes both Taylor Parkway, but then also some of the properties that have been farmed, and then some areas north on 83, also some areas south on 83 that are heavily farmed. They're just not contributing to a parcel TIF right now. So, few uses to date. We've been accumulating. Our TIF funds have kind of functioned like a piggy bank for the most part. We haven't utilized them to great extent. We have one agreement that was with Drug Mart related to traffic improvements at Bagley and Lorraine Road, where I think it was signal or turn lane improvements that we partially funded through TIF. And then the biggest use of TIF will help to offset the cost of the Cypress Avenue extension. So that will be a very helpful infusion of money into that project. So what can we do that we have, again, this uneven result? And we would like to talk to you more about incentive districts. And so my underlying photos, just to give you a hint of what this means for North Ridgeville, which is heavily developed as residential. So I guess just setting the stage, one of our master plan objectives was to ensure that new development funds the directly attributable cost of impacted infrastructure. And so we look at all the different ways that we can do that. And the infrastructure, or the incentive district, which is the TIF 40C, is one of those tools that I think we can use to help meet that master plan goal.
Thank you. And again, as we discussed, a 40B TIF captures commercial improvements, but it does not capture owner-occupied improvement. So like owner-occupied housing does not contribute to a 40B TIF as established here. So what does? The answer is an incentive district, which is a TIF under 5709 40C. These are structured a little bit different. There's different procedures you have to vote to, or processes you have to take to implement them. They have to be 300 contiguous acres, though you can set up multiple ones in one ordinance, but they still need to be 300 acres. but they also capture the TIF revenue from, or the pilots from all of the properties in the district, and they can also be spent for the same purposes for public infrastructure. So again, the purpose of a 40C TIF is very similar to a 40B TIF, except it's capturing improvements from owner-occupied housing. So how they're a little bit different is if you have an incentive district TIF, if it's been in a different TIF and has provided funds, it is not eligible for a 40C TIF unless it's been what's called a non-performing parcel. Getting into a bit of the weeds here, but if you have a parcel that's not been producing any revenue in a 40B TIF, it could be converted to a 40C TIF if it hasn't provided any revenue to date, and then it would then capture improvements if owner-occupied housing would be captured there. One of the determinations council would need to make to implement a 40C TIF is if there is a improvement that's going to happen, the city would have to adopt an economic development plan and identify that that area does not have the public infrastructure necessary to meet the needs of that economic development plan as certified by the city engineer. So you might look at it and say, this is going to put added pressure on this traffic signalization or this street or something out somewhere else. Maybe it's not within the development where you can make the developer pay for it, but it's further away, but it's still something that would benefit from the city. Those are things that you identify in an economic development plan that would be approved by council and your city engineer would have to certify to. Another common example is if you have parkland and someone is going to build a residential improvement, we know it's going to put more pressure on a nearby public park. You could use some of the TIF payments to help pay for improvements or maintenance of that nearby public park. One thing that's also a bit different with an incentive district TIF than with a 40B TIF is you have to negotiate, or the county has certain revenue sharing rights. As we discussed with the 40B TIF, we're going to make the schools whole, so then the schools don't need to be negotiated with. They just receive notice and they receive the same amount of money they would receive otherwise. But under a 40C TIF, the county is entitled to notification. The counties, it's obviously completely up to the county. They can waive any kind of compensation, or they can enter into an agreement with the city to provide some level of compensation of the TIF money. This would all be money that would be generated from the TIF. Another thing about a 40C TIF that's important to remember is it does require that there be a public hearing held with all the owners of the property, and in certain cases they have the ability to opt out of the TIF. Again, that doesn't normally happen because, again, it does not increase their taxes, it does not lower their taxes, it's just a matter of where the revenue is going. Go for it.
So, why consider an incentive district versus the TIF that we have, that process that we've utilized for the last 10 years? I think simply just the level of housing development we've had, we've missed an opportunity to capture the revenue associated with much of that development. And so we have, new housing that adds to our infrastructure, but this tool can help to offset the strain that residential development leads to. I think, incentive district, by its name, it sounds like you're incentivizing something. You're incentivizing residential development, and I think, hearing that at first, I'm like, the city of North Ridgeville certainly does not need to incentivize residential development. It's here, but it's a misnomer. It does not incentivize residential construction. It simply captures that property value related to growth that comes from new development, and then it redirects that money into a fund that can specifically be used to fund public improvements. And the uses are pretty broad, so roads, sewers, parks, utilities, all the things that make community, these funds can be spent for capital purposes. So, much like the commercial industrial TIF, the city still is in the driver's seat. So the city has full control over the allocation of funds. Some developers may request support for projects, other developers may not. But as that piggy bank grows, the city can determine how those funds are used, whether they're for immediate day one needs or whether they're going to maybe set aside funds for road resurfacing in 30 years or so. So I think there's a lot of benefit to North Ridgeville to consider this approach. We also just wanted to touch on TIF versus some other revenue tools because, we have to look at everything collectively as a puzzle. It's not just one tool. It's all of them that we can consider when we're thinking about future, capital improvements that might be needed. Probably the thing that council's most familiar with is actually developer contributions. So when we review new development, whether it's commercial or residential, we'll often require a traffic study to look at the impacts of a potential project, whether it requires turn lanes or deceleration lanes, a traffic signal, or other improvements, widenings. The city can require that the developer actually construct those off-site traffic improvements. Developers also extend sewer and water lines, often, down corridors or roads where there hasn't been sewer to get from the endpoint to where their project is located at their own expense that benefits the city. So, we continue to look at developer contributions as a meaningful way of offsetting infrastructure costs for the city. Impact fees, I know in the master plan process, our steering committee talked about this topic quite a bit because it seems to kind of be like a buzz phrase that people say or suggest it could be like a solution, the magic bullet to, growth in a community. But really impact fees they're one-time fees, they're pretty narrow, they're related to growth at that moment. And they are, they're limited to capital projects. So we can't use it for employees, for salaries, for just general fund relief. It would have to be tied to the specific end use. And actually, North Ridgeville does impose an impact fee. We have park fees. So for every new dwelling in North Ridgeville, there is a $250 fee that's imposed for that new dwelling, and that goes into a certain fund that has to be used only for park purposes. So to me, that is a reasonable type of impact fee because it's narrowly tailored and it's focused and it's specified for park and it goes into the park fund. Tax increment financing is a broad tool. It provides recurring revenues. These TIFs last for 30 years. In some cases, they can be extended longer. And they can therefore fund larger projects and also they can support borrowing. So for long-term infrastructure needs, replacements or resurfacings or utility repair, replacement, TIF can be a great tool. But then, of course, income tax is kind of our key funding source for capital improvements and general fund revenues that support all governmental operations. So again, all of these things can kind of work together, and we think that they're important that they continue to work together. We are presenting to council the idea of the incentive district as a tool that we would like to add to our toolbox. There's not a specific area or areas. We have not created a map and we don't have legislation to bring before council, but as projects are proposed to the city that would be residential in nature, an area that's zoned for residential and where that use would be permitted, we would like the ability to consider whether the TIF incentive district would be an important designation to bring to the table in order to then be able to capture this additional revenue from that increment of new value. So it's really just an introduction to that idea and to get council's feeling of, if we were to go this route again, the parcels that we would have to consider would have to be non-performing. If they're currently in a TIF, we would have to remove them from the commercial industrial in order to put them in the incentive district, and there's some hoops to jump through, so maybe not every parcel would work for that purpose. There's not, might not be available everywhere in the city, but we think it's an option that we should consider and that would have good long-term benefit for North Ridgeville. I'm probably missing things. Am I missing things, Russ?
No, I think that sums it up. I think the general idea is where you would have these improvements, you're able to then capture funds to help offset the public infrastructure impact of those improvements.
So we're ready for your questions.
Okay, thank you. I guess one question I had, maybe just for clarification, if you could go back to the map that you showed. Right now, we're only using 40B TIFs.
Yes.
Which are parcel TIFs as compared to the district. So those areas that are identified there are obviously larger than one parcel. So I guess I was under the impression that it was just a specific parcel and not an area that included multiple parcels. Can you maybe just
I think the revised code does a really good job of making it as confusing as humanly possible. So
Okay.
I will tell you that a parcel TIF is what we usually refer to as a 40B TIF. What that means is one ordinance can create a district, but then each parcel, when an improvement happens, can run for 30 years for that parcel. So that's why I think people call it a parcel TIF. So the ordinance would say, we're going to create this whole area, the hot pink area or any one of them under one ordinance, but then say for 30 years there'll be a TIF on that parcel, which will commence when there's an improvement built on that parcel. So you might have one created, an ordinance adopted this year. You might have some parcels that have a TIF start running next year. Some might not start for 5-10 years from now until an improvement happens. An incentive district does not have that benefit. That 300-acre area, it all has to start running. That 30-year clock has to run for the whole district from the start to the finish.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, thank you. And you may have already answered this question, but just to clarify, so we're only talking about the increase in taxes related to improvements that would increase the value. So in other words, when the county comes and does their reevaluation of properties and, sometimes those properties values go up, that wouldn't be something that would be captured in the TIF.
It would be captured.
Oh, it would be.
Yes. The
Okay.
base value is when the ordinance would be passed, and different TIFs function differently, but both with a 40B and a 40C, the base value would be set when you adopt the TIF ordinance.
Oh, okay.
So if the base value is $1,000, that would be the base amount. So tax rates will change, but it'll be attributed to that $1,000 base was where the funds would go to the existing taxing entities. And then if the value then goes to, let's say, 100,000, that additional 99,000 would be all subject, would all go into the TIF. And if the county came back later and appraised it at 105,000, that additional amount would also go to the TIF. That $1,000 base would be the only part of it that would continue to go to existing taxing entities. Now, with the ordinance, you can have it start based on appreciation. So it could be valued at $1,000, and we could say the TIFs, the 30 years start now, so nothing's built, it just goes up to $1,100. You normally don't do that because that 30-year clock starts running. So you normally have it start when an improvement is built, so there's actually a bigger amount so that you get the whole 30 years of that larger amount
Gotcha.
to put into your public improvements. Was that clear? I'm sorry. I talk about this all the time, so sometimes I'm not clear.
No, that helps. No, that helps for sure. I appreciate that. Thank you. Do we have any additional questions or comments from the council?
To the chair,
Mr. Schaefer?
is this essentially a property tax increase?
No, it is not a property tax increase. The amount of money that somebody would spend on property taxes that lives in a TIF or out of a TIF will be the exact same. No more, no less.
Well, you said that a parcel benefits from an improvement. How does it benefit if it's not a property tax?
The taxes, if there's a parcel of land with no structure on it, and then someone constructs a structure, regardless of TIF, there would be more property tax due on that parcel because there was an improvement on that parcel. And so the TIF would just say that money will be redirected for public improvement use at the city. It does not mean the owner of the property would pay any more or any less than whether it was TIF'd or not.
Is a pilot payment the same or different than a tax?
A pilot stands for a payment in lieu of tax. So I would say that from the property owner perspective, it probably feels the same. It's no different than if the property is subject to a TIF or it's not.
Collected the same way?
It is collected the same way. You get a bill from the county auditor, you pay the county auditor. It just impacts the back end on how the funds are distributed by the county auditor.
Because the Ohio Supreme Court has typically shot things like this down if it's referred to as a tax. But if
That's
it's
why,
a payment is they're more favorable on it.
and that's why it's a payment in lieu of tax. And it's all established under, it's 570942 of the revised code.
What happens if the property is changed in such a way as it actually decreases in value?
If it decreases in value, if let's say it was built for the parcel was worth $1,000, and then something's built, it goes up to $100,000. So the taxes or the value that would be assessed on the $99,000 would go to the pilot. If that drops to $80,000, that just means that the TIF fund receives less funds because it went down. And if it dropped below the base value, then they would generate no funds for the TIF.
Because we have a BP station here on the corner that the value of the property is actually decreased because it's contaminated. I just wondered how that would work.
Yeah, it would just reduce the amount of money because, again, because it's not a tax, if the value reduces and if they would pay less otherwise, they would pay less under the TIF structure as well.
I can give you a couple of examples of TIFs being used in the city. When Walgreens was built, that new section of Lear-Nagel was built using TIF money. When Riddell went in, that road was the road that leads back to Riddell and also to the bowling alley. That was built using TIF money. And those were specific TIFs for those properties and for those roadways. When Dayton Freight was built, they did not ask for any kind of incentives whatsoever. And so there is a TIF district, that bright green TIF district that they sit in, and that's where a lot of the money is coming from that's in that TIF district right now, is coming from Dayton Freight, for example. Then Kim mentioned when Drug Mart was built, there was some signalization that we had to change at Bagley and Lorraine. We used some of the TIF money from that TIF to take care of those changes. And we are using TIF money for the extension of Cypress Avenue to help pay for that project. So those are just some examples of how TIFs have been used in the city.
All right, thank you. Any other members of council? Mr. Winkle?
Mr. President, thank you. A couple questions. So when you can opt out of a TIF if you owned a parcel, does that follow the opting in or out? Does that follow the parcel or ownership, meaning like it would be like a deed restriction where it's always there once the first person agrees to it?
The only type of TIF that the owner can potentially opt out of is an incentive district TIF. And the way that works is when the TIF district is created, property owner, all the property owners in it receive a notice. There's something called an overlay, which is established in the revised code. It's hard to describe, but it's pretty much the map, and you have to build a box around it that has to fit certain dimensions. Any property that's within that exceeds that box or goes out of that box, the property owner has a right to opt out. So what happens is the process is the city council, if they were to consider this ordinance, the property owner receives a 30-day notice. If they chose, the city has to have a public hearing. That a resident could either come to the hearing and opt out, or they can provide you within 15 days after the public notice a written notice requesting to opt out. But it would only be those who have property within the incentive district that also extends beyond the overlay that is created. It's
Thank you.
very confusing. I'm sorry.
No, it's
Yeah,
fine. I'm
it's-
just trying to follow it. And then another question. So with us taking a hard look at how the city's zoned, is this going to kind of overlay with a new zoning vision with the TIFs, how they would lay out with the new zoning vision that we're currently working on?
I wouldn't say that the incentive districts are going to overlay with the zoning map exactly. It's just not possible, especially given all of the TIFs we currently have at play. The greatest opportunities where we are already seeing residential development, where it's expected to continue to be residential development, and where the property is currently not producing, either not in a TIF or not producing pilots because it's in CAUV. So, for example, like when you look at that north area of the city that's developed pretty heavily with residential developments, and you can't imagine seeing an industrial or commercial use finding its way into the middle of those neighborhoods, the remaining of the agricultural land, to me, would make a lot of sense of putting it into an incentive district. So if or when it does develop residentially, that we have an opportunity of now capturing that increment of value rather than capture nothing. So, you know, in a community that sees housing development and growth, and there's, you know, some of our phases of our existing subdivisions still have time to go, this is an opportunity to at least capture some increment of value from that, some of those decisions of the past, and still capture some revenue into the future here.
Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions?
Through the chair.
Mr. Schaefer?
This green area, I believe is where the high-tension wires run, which I had thought would be a marvelous place to put a park. Does a TIF disincentivize us from using the land as park or public use or something?
Whether property is subject to a TIF would not restrict the uses for that property in any way, by the
I
owner
didn't-
or the city.
I didn't mean restricted, I mean disincentivize.
I don't see how it would disincentivize, because it could also be removed from the TIF if there was concerns about it being in a TIF. But if the city owned property and wanted to develop a park, whether it was in a TIF or not would have no impact.
Do we have the ability to get a copy of these things on the presentation here?
Yes. Has the presentation.
And just for my own knowledge, this is more for general aggrandizement, or are we going to vote on something related to this?
We're not asking council to vote on anything related to this at this point, but if a project should come forward that is within an area that could qualify as an incentive district, we wanted to see if council would be in favor of us approaching with legislation that would either create the incentive district and/or remove parcels from a current commercial industrial to place in a residential before we go through those machinations.
So this is just more of an informational session.
Yes.
Gotcha. Any additional comments, questions? It does seem like it would make sense to be able to take advantage of, you know, some of the, you know, things that are already happening here. You might as well, like you said, it's unfortunate that this didn't happen 30 years ago, but can't go back and change the past, I guess. So, and then Assistant Clerk, you have these slides and you'll be able to provide those to all of council members? Okay, thank you. All right, well, with no additional comments this evening and no additional business on our agenda, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.